You were taught that being kind would make people value you, so you became the reliable one, the understanding one, the one who says yes, the one who adjusts, the one who doesn't complain. And slowly, something strange happened. The more available you became, the less respected you felt. People interrupted you. They assumed you'd handle it. They expected you to sacrifice your time. They got comfortable crossing your lines. And you told yourself, it's fine, I'm just being a good person. But deep down, it didn't feel fine. There's a quiet resentment that grows when you constantly override your own limits. Not loud, not dramatic, just a steady weight. You smile on the outside, but inside you feel unseen, taken for granted. Replaceable. Here's the hard truth. Kindness without boundaries does not create respect. It creates convenience. When you are always available, you are rarely valued. When you never say no, your yes loses power. When you apologize for existing, people stop noticing your presence. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. You don't need to be less kind. You need to stop betraying yourself in the name of kindness. There is a difference between being generous and being compliant, between being warm and being weak, between being helpful and being used. Most people never learn that difference. They think respect is earned through overgiving, through proving, through pleasing, through avoiding conflict. They shrink their voice so others feel comfortable. They swallow opinions so nobody feels challenged. They trade honesty for harmony. But harmony built on self-erasure is not peace. It is quiet self-abandonment, and people can feel it. Respect is not about how much you give. It is about how solid you stand. When your words are measured, when your tone is steady, when your limits are visible, when your no does not tremble, something shifts. People lean in differently. They speak to you differently. They think twice before crossing you. Not because you became aggressive, but because you became grounded. In this audiobook, you are going to learn something most people never practice. How to remain kind while being unshakable. How to speak calmly without sounding uncertain. How to say no without guilt. How to set boundaries early instead of exploding later. How to stop explaining yourself to people who never asked you to. You will learn how to detach from the need to be liked. Because being liked and being respected are not the same currency. One makes you socially comfortable. The other makes you powerful. There will be moments when you feel the urge to soften your words, to add an extra apology, to over-explain your decision, to say yes just to avoid tension. That urge is old conditioning. You are not here to eliminate kindness. You are here to upgrade it. Real strength is quiet. Real authority is calm. Real confidence does not beg for approval. Imagine walking into a room and not needing to impress anyone. Imagine saying, "That doesn't work for me," without your heart racing. Imagine holding eye contact after you speak instead of looking down. Imagine helping people because you choose to, not because you're afraid not to. That is what changes everything. You can be warm without being walked over. You can be generous without being drained. You can care deeply without collapsing your standards. The world does not respect unlimited access. It respects clear limits. Over the next hour, you will reshape how you show up in conversations, in relationships, at work, in your own mind. You will notice the small habits that quietly reduce your presence, and you will replace them with behaviors that signal stability. This is not about dominance. It is about self-respect. Because once you respect your own time, your own space, your own energy, others begin to adjust automatically. They don't respond to your kindness. They respond to your certainty. And certainty comes from knowing where you stand. So if you have ever felt overlooked, if you have ever said yes when you meant no, if you have ever felt exhausted from being the good one, this is where that pattern ends. You don't need to harden your heart. You need to strengthen your spine. Stay with me. By the end of this, you will not only understand why people have been underestimating you, you will know exactly how to change it. And if this message resonates with you, share this audiobook with someone who is kind, generous, and silently tired of being taken for granted. Because kindness is powerful, but only when it stands on boundaries. Chapter 1. The Hidden Cost of Being Too Nice. There is a moment most people never talk about. It happens after you agree to something you didn't want to do. You smile, you nod, you say, "Sure, no problem." And then you walk away feeling smaller. Not angry, not explosive, just drained. That feeling is the hidden cost. Being too nice doesn't destroy you in dramatic ways. It erodes you quietly, a little at a time. Every time you silence your preference, every time you minimize your discomfort, every time you tell yourself it's not a big deal, it becomes a big deal because every ignored boundary sends a message, not to others first, but to you. It says, my time is negotiable, my comfort is optional, my needs come last. And once you repeat that message enough, your nervous system starts believing it. You begin to expect to be overlooked. You anticipate being interrupted. You assume your opinion carries less weight. You adjust before anyone even asks you to. That is the psychological tax of excessive kindness. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel was competent, reliable, the kind of employee every company says they appreciate. He stayed late, covered shifts, took on extra projects without complaint. If someone forgot something, Daniel handled it. At first, he was praised. Then something changed. He stopped being thanked and started being expected. Colleagues would drop tasks on his desk with a casual, "You're better at this anyway." His manager assumed he would always pick up the slack. Meetings moved forward without his input because Daniel's flexible. He wasn't flexible. He was afraid of being difficult. He told himself he was being a team player. But at home, he felt resentful. He was exhausted, invisible. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. It was small. Someone else got promoted. Someone less capable. Someone who said no more often. Someone who didn't stay late. That's when Daniel realized something uncomfortable. He was respected for his reliability, but not valued for his boundaries. You see, respect does not grow from sacrifice alone. It grows from perceived strength. When people sense that you will always bend, they stop treating you like something solid. This doesn't mean people are evil. It means they adapt to what you allow. Human behavior follows reinforcement. If every request is met with compliance, the requests increase. If every inconvenience is absorbed without protest, the inconveniences multiply. You are teaching others how to treat you, and the lesson might not be what you intended, as there is another cost most people ignore: internal fragmentation. When your outer behavior doesn't match your inner truth, you split. One part of you wants peace, another part wants honesty, one part wants approval, another part wants dignity. That internal tension creates anxiety. You replay conversations later. You think of what you should have said. You imagine stronger versions of yourself, but in the moment, you freeze into politeness. Why? Because being liked feels safer than being firm. From childhood, many people were rewarded for being agreeable. Quiet children were praised. Compliant children were labeled good. Disagreeing was called disrespectful. Expressing anger was seen as rude. So you learn to suppress friction, but friction is not violence, it is clarity. A boundary is not aggression, it is definition. When you remove definition from your personality, people stop seeing your edges. And when they can't see your edges, they walk through them. Being too nice also distorts perception. When you overgive, people subconsciously lower the perceived value of what you offer. Not because they don't care, but because scarcity creates weight. Effort that appears effortless gets taken for granted. If you are always available, your availability becomes invisible. If you always help, your help feels standard. If you never push back, your silence becomes background noise. This is not about becoming harsh, it is about recalibrating how your presence is felt. Strong individuals radiate something different. It is not loudness, it is not dominance, it is contained certainty. They do not rush to fill silence, they do not over-justify decisions, and they do not soften every statement with apology. And because of that, their kindness feels intentional, not automatic. Intentional kindness is powerful. Automatic kindness is predictable. Predictable behavior invites testing. Testing leads to erosion. Here is the deeper truth. When you constantly override your limits, you lose self-trust. You start doubting your own instincts. You feel discomfort, but ignore it. You sense unfairness, but rationalize it. Over time, you become disconnected from your own signals, and a person disconnected from their signals cannot stand firmly. Self-respect begins internally, not externally. Before others respect your boundaries, you must enforce them in private. That means noticing the moment discomfort appears. The tightness in your chest, the hesitation before you say yes, the pause before you volunteer again. That pause is your wisdom speaking. Too often, you silence it. The cost of being too nice is not that others take advantage. The cost is that you abandon yourself. And once self-abandonment becomes habitual, your confidence weakens. Confidence is built through alignment. When what you think, what you feel, and what you say match, your nervous system stabilizes. Your posture changes, your voice steadies. But when you constantly edit yourself for comfort, your presence shrinks. This chapter is not about blaming your kindness. Kindness is strength, but strength without structure collapses. You're allowed to be generous and selective, warm and firm, supportive and unavailable. The hidden cost ends the moment you stop treating your own limits as optional. Ask yourself, where have I been saying yes out of fear? Where have I been apologizing for simply existing? Where have I been absorbing tension to keep the peace? Awareness is the first reclaiming of ground. From here forward, your goal is simple. Notice the moment before compliance. That moment is power. And power, used calmly, changes how the world responds to you. Chapter 2. Why people don't respect overgivers. There is a pattern that repeats itself in workplaces, relationships, families, and friendships. The person who gives the most is rarely the one treated with the most respect. At first, that sounds unfair. Shouldn't generosity earn admiration? Shouldn't helpfulness create value? In theory, yes. In reality, no. Because respect is not built on how much you give. It is built on how clearly you define your limits. When you overgive, something subtle happens. Your effort becomes expected. Your availability becomes standard. Your sacrifice becomes invisible. People adapt quickly. If you answer every call immediately, they stop appreciating the response time. If you always adjust your schedule, they stop asking if it works for you. If you never push back, they stop checking your boundaries. Look, it is not cruelty. It is conditioning. Human beings respond to patterns. And overgiving creates a dangerous pattern. Unlimited access. Unlimited access lowers perceived value. Think about anything in life that feels rare. It carries weight. It feels intentional. It demands respect. Now think about something always available. Always there. Always accessible. It fades into the background. The same rule applies to your time, your energy, and your emotional labor. When your help feels automatic, it loses impact. There is another layer most people miss. Overgiving often carries invisible tension. You might say yes with a smile, but internally you feel pressure. you feel the cost. That emotional friction leaks into your tone, your posture, your micro-expressions. People sense it. And when generosity feels strained instead of grounded, it doesn't command respect. It signals instability. Strong individuals give from choice, not obligation. There is a difference. Choice feels calm. Obligation feels anxious. When you give because you're afraid of disappointing someone, your nervous system tightens. Your voice shifts slightly. Your breathing changes. Even if you think you are hiding it, others detect the subtle signal you are not fully in control. Respect depends on perceived control. If someone senses that you cannot comfortably say no, they unconsciously place you lower in the hierarchy. Not because they dislike you, but because hierarchy is built on firmness. Let me tell you about Maya. Maya was the emotional anchor in her friend group. If someone had a problem, they called her. If someone needed advice, she listened for hours. She rearranged her schedule to support birthdays, events, last-minute crises. She believed loyalty meant availability. Over time, something shifted. Her calls were no longer urgent. They were expected. Her time was no longer requested. It was assumed. When she tried to say she was tired, friends responded with surprise. "You're always so strong," they said. Strong, but exhausted. The moment she declined an invitation for the first time, the reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion, as if she had broken an unspoken contract. That contract had been written by her own behavior. Overgiving rewrites your identity in the minds of others. You stop being seen as a person with preferences. You become the role you play. Reliable, flexible, always there. Roles are convenient. People respect individuals. They rely on roles. If you want respect, you must step out of the role. Another truth, overgiving reduces tension, and tension is necessary for boundaries. When you eliminate all friction, you eliminate all definition. Think of a leader who never disagrees, never challenges, never says no. They might be liked, but they are not feared. And without a certain level of perceived firmness, authority dissolves. You do not need to intimidate anyone, but you must be comfortable holding mild discomfort. Discomfort is the gateway to respect. When you pause before answering, when you say, "Let me think about that," when you decline without over-explaining, you create space. Space signals deliberation. Deliberation signals strength. Overgivers eliminate space. They respond instantly. They agree quickly. They fill silence nervously. And in doing so, they unintentionally communicate lower status. High-value individuals are not rushed by external pressure. They are anchored internally. Their time is not open-ended. Their energy is not limitless. Their availability is not assumed. And because of that, when they choose to give, it feels intentional. Intentional generosity feels powerful. Automatic generosity feels ordinary. Another reason overgivers lose respect is predictability. If I know you will always say yes, I do not need to negotiate. If I know you will absorb the inconvenience, I do not need to consider your comfort. Predictability without boundaries creates exploitation, not malicious exploitation, passive exploitation. It grows quietly. At first, it is small favors, then larger ones, then expectations, then entitlement. The shift is gradual. One day, you realize people are not asking anymore. They are informing. That is the moment respect has already declined. You might think the solution is to give less abruptly. That can create shock. The real solution is to recalibrate your pace. Delay your responses. Silence is powerful. When someone asks you for something, count to 3 before answering. Breathe once. Feel your body. Notice if there is tension. Notice if your yes is automatic. If it is automatic, it is not intentional. And if it is not intentional, It weakens you. Start small. Instead of saying, "Sure," say, "I'll check and get back to you." Instead of volunteering immediately, wait to see if someone else steps up. Instead of over-delivering, deliver exactly what was agreed upon. You are not becoming selfish. You are restoring balance. Balance generates respect. When others realize your time is not endlessly accessible, they become more mindful. When they see that your energy has limits, they become more appreciative. When they understand that your yes must be earned, they treat it with weight. This is not manipulation, it is alignment. You are teaching people how to value you. The moment you stop overgiving, something surprising happens. Some people pull back. That reaction reveals who valued you and who valued your utility. Do not panic when that happens. Stability attracts respect. Desperation attracts use. Your goal is not to become distant. Your goal is to become deliberate. Deliberate in what you accept. Deliberate in what you decline. Deliberate in how you show up. Because respect does not follow generosity alone. It follows strength expressed calmly. And strength begins the moment your giving becomes a choice, not a reflex. Chapter 3. Stop apologizing for existing. There are words that quietly shrink your presence. They seem harmless, polite, soft, but repeated daily, they train people to see you as smaller than you are. The most common one is this: sorry. Not for mistakes, not for real harm, but for existing. Sorry to bother you. Sorry if this is a dumb question. Sorry, just checking in. Sorry, can I ask something? Listen closely to what those phrases imply. They imply intrusion, they imply inconvenience, they imply low value. When you apologize before you speak, you lower your status before the conversation even begins. You may think you're being courteous. What you're actually signaling is uncertainty. Over-apologizing is a subtle form of self-doubt made audible. It comes from a fear of taking up space. Space in conversations. Space in decisions. Space in rooms. You learned somewhere along the way that minimizing yourself kept you safe. That being non-threatening kept you liked. That softening your presence avoided conflict. But minimizing yourself also reduces your influence. There is a difference between humility and self-erasure. Humility is quiet strength. Self-erasure is chronic shrinking. One builds respect, the other dissolves it. Let me show you how this plays out. Imagine two people entering a meeting. One says, "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was crazy." The other says, "Thank you for waiting." The first focuses on apology. The second reframes with gratitude. Both acknowledge the situation. Only one preserves authority. Language shapes perception. Every time you apologize unnecessarily, you train others to view your presence as slightly disruptive, slightly inconvenient, or slightly less justified. And perception compounds. A manager who constantly says, "Sorry, but can we?" sounds unsure. A leader who says, "Let's do this," sounds certain. Certainty commands attention. Unnecessary apology invites dismissal. This doesn't mean you stop apologizing when you're wrong. Accountability builds respect, but reflexive apology weakens it. Notice when you say sorry out of habit rather than responsibility. You bump into someone, that's appropriate. You make an error, take ownership. But saying sorry because you're asking a question, because you're clarifying expectations, because you're expressing preference, that is self-minimization. The deeper issue isn't the word, it's the belief behind it. The belief that your needs are secondary, that your voice is optional, that your time is less valuable. Then when you hold that belief, your body language shifts too. Shoulders curve slightly inward. Voice lowers at the end of sentences. Eye contact breaks early. These signals are small, but humans are highly sensitive to subtle cues. People do not consciously think, "This person lacks authority." They simply feel it. and feelings guide behavior. If you want to command respect, you must first become comfortable occupying space without apology. Start by replacing your language. Instead of "sorry to bother you," say "when you have a moment." Instead of "sorry, just checking in," say "following up on this." Instead of "sorry if this is stupid," say "here's a thought." Short, direct, neutral. Notice something important. Neutral language feels stronger than emotional language. When you over-soften, you leak emotional energy, and you ask for permission before stating reality. Strong communicators do not ask permission to exist. They state, they pause, they let the words stand. There is also a psychological trap tied to over-apologizing, guilt conditioning. If you apologize constantly, you begin to feel guilty even when you've done nothing wrong. You internalize responsibility for others' reactions. Someone seems upset, you apologize. Someone looks stressed, you assume it's you. Someone disagrees, you soften your stance. This creates instability. When you take responsibility for everything, you lose clarity about what is actually yours. Respect requires clarity. You must know what is your fault and what is not. You must know when to stand firm and when to correct yourself. If everything triggers an apology, nothing feels solid. Here is a powerful exercise. And for the next 24 hours, track every time you say sorry. Write it down. At the end of the day, review the list. How many were necessary? How many were reflexive? How many were rooted in fear? Awareness alone changes behavior. The second step is tolerance. When you stop apologizing reflexively, you will feel discomfort. Silence will feel longer. Requests will feel heavier. You may worry you sound cold. That discomfort is growth. You're expanding your tolerance for occupying space. Strong presence is built through tolerating mild social tension without collapsing. You do not need to be aggressive. You need to be steady. Steady voice. Steady eye contact. Steady breathing. If someone reacts negatively because you didn't cushion your words with apology, observe their reaction without absorbing it. Their discomfort does not mean you are wrong. It simply means the dynamic shifted. And shifts create friction before stability returns. Over time, something remarkable happens. When you remove unnecessary apologies, your speech becomes cleaner, more precise, more deliberate. Your words carry weight. You stop rushing to fill silence. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You begin speaking in statements rather than permissions. I need this done by Friday. That doesn't work for me. I disagree. Simple sentences. No apology attached. When used calmly, they transform how others respond, because underneath language is posture, and underneath posture is belief. When you believe your presence is legitimate, so your communication changes automatically. You no longer ask to be heard. You assume you will be, and that assumption shifts everything. This chapter is not about hardening your tone. It is about removing the habit of shrinking. Every unnecessary apology is a micro-withdrawal from your authority. Stop withdrawing. Your voice does not need permission. It needs stability. And stability begins the moment you stop apologizing for taking up space. Chapter 4. Learn to say no. Without explaining. There is a specific moment that reveals whether you command respect or quietly surrender it. It is the moment after you say no. For many people, the word leaves their mouth, and panic follows, so they begin to explain. I can't because I'm really busy. I would, but I have so much going on. I wish I could, but maybe next time. I'm sorry, I just... Notice what's happening. The no is spoken, then it is diluted. Explanation often comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of seeming rude. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of losing approval. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The more you explain your no, the less solid it sounds. Explanation invites negotiation. When you give reasons, you hand the other person material to argue with. I'm busy. Okay, but this will only take 5 minutes. I have a lot going on. Everyone does. This is important. I'm tired. Just push through. Now you are trapped in defense. You are no longer setting a boundary. You are justifying your existence. Strong boundaries are not debates. They are statements. There is a powerful difference between these two sentences. I can't help this weekend because I'm overwhelmed and I've had a long week and I really need rest. And I'm not available this weekend. Both communicate the same outcome. Only one invites negotiation. When you over-explain, you signal uncertainty. When you speak briefly, you signal finality. This does not mean you become robotic or cold. It means you trust that your decision is enough. If someone asks you to stay late at work, try this. That won't work for me today. Pause, and silence will feel uncomfortable. Let it. Do not rush to fill it. Silence after a boundary reinforces strength. Most people collapse into explanation because they cannot tolerate the tension that follows refusal. They want to repair the discomfort instantly. But that discomfort is not danger. It is adjustment. People are adjusting to a new version of you, a version that does not automatically comply. Let me tell you about Aaron. Aaron was known as the dependable one in his department. Whenever a project fell behind, he stepped in. Whenever a teammate missed a deadline, he absorbed the impact. One day, his manager asked him to take on yet another urgent assignment. Normally, Aaron would say yes. This time, he paused. He felt the familiar pressure rise in his chest, the instinct to agree, the reflex to prove himself. Instead, he said, calmly, "I can't take that on right now." Silence. His manager stared for a moment. Aaron resisted the urge to explain. He didn't mention workload. He didn't justify. The manager nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll reassign it." That was it. No argument, no backlash, no catastrophe. Aaron later realized something important. The fear of saying no was larger in his mind than in reality. Most people expect resistance because they've trained others to expect compliance. When you shift that pattern, there may be surprise, not hostility. And even if there is resistance, it is information. If someone reacts with anger or manipulation when you set a boundary, that reveals the foundation of the relationship. Respect does not punish boundaries. Entitlement does. There is another trap people fall into, where they say no, but they offer alternatives immediately to soften the blow. "I can't do it tonight, but maybe tomorrow, or maybe I can help a little, or maybe I can..." That reflex again comes from discomfort. You do not owe compensation for protecting your time. If you genuinely want to offer an alternative, do it from choice, not anxiety. Choice feels grounded. Anxiety feels rushed. Your tone matters here. A strong no is calm, not sharp. If you sound irritated, people hear hostility. If you sound shaky, people hear weakness. Aim for neutral steadiness. Lower your pitch slightly, slow your pace, finish your sentence without trailing upward. That doesn't work for me. Period. There is power in completion. Another key principle: do not apologize after a boundary. "I'm sorry, but I can't." Remove the apology, and it subtly reframes your boundary as a wrongdoing. You're not wrong for protecting your energy. You're not wrong for declining requests. You're not wrong for choosing yourself. Boundaries are not acts of aggression. They are acts of alignment. Here is a practical exercise. For the next week, implement the one-sentence rule. Anytime you decline something, use one sentence only. No additional justification unless directly asked. If they ask why, respond briefly. "I have other priorities." Then stop. Notice what happens. You will feel exposed at first, vulnerable, slightly guilty. That is the withdrawal from approval addiction. Approval addiction makes you believe your value depends on constant accommodation. Breaking that addiction requires repetition. Each time you say no and survive the discomfort, your nervous system recalibrates. You realize the world does not collapse. You realize people adjust. You realize that your worth does not decrease when you protect your time. Over time, something shifts internally. You stop seeing no as rejection. You start seeing it as selection. You are selecting where your energy goes. You are selecting how your time is used. You are selecting the standards you operate by. Selection signals authority. Authority creates respect. Remember this. People do not respect those who never refuse. They rely on them. Reliance is not the same as respect. Respect requires edges. And edges are visible when you can say no without explanation, without apology, without emotional collapse. Your no is not a weapon. It is a boundary line. Speak it clearly. Hold it calmly. Let it stand. And watch how differently the world begins to respond. Chapter 5. Set boundaries. Early. Most people don't struggle with boundaries because they don't believe in them. They struggle because they set them too late. They wait until they're exhausted. They wait until they're irritated. They wait until resentment has already built up. And by that point, the boundary doesn't come out calm. It comes out emotional. When boundaries are delayed, they feel like attacks. When boundaries are early, they feel like clarity. This is where many kind people sabotage themselves. At the beginning of a relationship, a job, a friendship, a collaboration, they say yes to everything. They want to seem cooperative, easygoing, supportive. So they overextend. They respond to messages instantly. They adjust schedules without question. They tolerate small inconveniences. Those small concessions become the standard. Then months later, when they finally try to pull back, it feels dramatic. Why are you suddenly distant? You never had a problem before. What changed? Nothing changed. You just reached your limit. But because the limit was never communicated early, it now feels like a personality shift instead of a healthy adjustment. Boundaries set early prevent emotional explosions later. Clarity at the beginning protects respect at the end. Think about any strong leader you've encountered. They don't wait until they're angry to clarify expectations. They define them up front. This is the deadline. This is how we communicate. This is what I'm available for. There's no hostility in those statements. Just definition. Definition reduces confusion. Confusion invites overreach. If you never clarify what works for you, people will test what they can get away with, not always consciously. But human nature explores open space. If there is no visible edge, the boundary does not exist. Let's look at relationships. In the early stages, people often ignore red flags to maintain harmony. A friend consistently cancels plans last minute. A partner interrupts frequently. A co-worker sends messages late at night. Instead of addressing it immediately, you tell yourself it's not a big deal. But it becomes one. Each unaddressed pattern reinforces itself. By the time you speak up, the behavior feels normal to the other person. Now you're not just setting a boundary. You're breaking a routine. Breaking routines creates friction. That friction feels heavier than it would have if you had addressed it early. Early boundaries are light. Late boundaries are heavy. Imagine starting a new job and saying calmly, "I don't check emails after 7 p.m., but I'll respond first thing in the morning." That's clear. No anger, no defensiveness, just structure. Now imagine answering emails at midnight for 6 months, and then suddenly saying you won't anymore. The same boundary now feels disruptive, not because it's wrong, but because you trained others to expect access. People adapt quickly to patterns. Your early behavior writes the script. If you want to command respect, you must write that script intentionally. There is another benefit to early boundaries. They filter people. Strong individuals respect clarity. Those who push back aggressively at reasonable boundaries reveal their mindset early. That information is valuable. It saves you time. It prevents deeper entanglement with people who only value convenience. Setting boundaries early also reduces internal stress. When expectations are clear, you don't constantly anticipate conflict. You don't overthink messages. You don't rehearse conversations in your head. You operate from structure. Structure creates stability, and stability is attractive. Here is the practical shift. Stop waiting for discomfort to become unbearable. Address small issues calmly, immediately. If someone interrupts you repeatedly, say, "Let me finish." Simple. If someone consistently shows up late, say, "I need us to start on time." Direct. If someone asks for favors frequently, say, "I can't take that on regularly." Notice the tone, neutral, grounded, brief. You do not need long speeches. You need steady delivery. Another powerful tactic is expectation framing. Before a project begins, say, "I'll need 2 days' notice for changes." Before agreeing to help someone, say, "I can do this once, but not every week." Before entering a collaboration, say, "Clear communication matters to me." When you define standards up front, you reduce the chance of resentment later. Resentment is often delayed communication. It builds quietly when you tolerate behavior that violates your preferences. Then one day, you snap. And snapping damages credibility. Calm consistency builds it. If you've already delayed boundaries in certain areas, it's not too late. But you must accept that adjusting patterns may create temporary tension. Expect that. Do not interpret it as failure. When you shift your standards, the environment recalibrates. Some people will adapt. Some may resist. The resistance is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is clarity. There is strength in saying, early on, "This works for me. This doesn't." No apology attached. Boundaries are not walls, they are guidelines. Walls block connection. Guidelines shape it. If someone reacts to your guideline as if it's a wall, that tells you more about them than about you. Remember this: kindness without structure invites confusion. Structure with kindness invites respect. You can smile and still be firm. You can be warm and still be clear. Setting boundaries early is not about control. It's about alignment. Alignment between what you value and how you allow yourself to be treated. The earlier you define your edges, the less often you will need to defend them. And the less you need to defend yourself, the more stable your presence becomes. Stable presence commands respect quietly. It does not demand it. It simply embodies it. Set the line early. Then stand by it calmly. Chapter 6. Detach from approval. There is a silent addiction that keeps many kind people small. It is not money. It is not power. It is approval. The need to be liked. The need to be seen as good, easy, helpful, agreeable. Approval feels safe. When people smile at you, when they thank you, when they say you're so nice, your nervous system relaxes. You feel accepted, included, secure. But approval is unstable. It depends on others' moods, on their expectations, on their comfort. And if your behavior is constantly adjusted to maintain approval, you lose internal stability. You begin to scan rooms before you speak. You monitor faces for reactions. You soften opinions to avoid tension. This is not kindness. It is hypervigilance. Approval-driven behavior creates a fragile identity because the moment someone disapproves, you feel shaken. A raised eyebrow feels like rejection. Silence feels like judgment. Disagreement feels like danger. So you adapt again. You shrink your stance, you change your tone, you apologize, and the cycle continues. Here is the reality most people avoid. If you want to command respect, you must tolerate being disliked occasionally. Not hated, not feared, but misunderstood at times. When you say no, when you enforce standards, when you speak directly, some people will feel uncomfortable. That discomfort does not mean you are wrong. It means you are no longer performing. There is a powerful difference between connection and approval. Connection is mutual. Approval is hierarchical. When you chase approval, you place yourself beneath others' judgment. When you prioritize connection, you show up authentically and allow others to respond however they choose. Approval addiction often starts early. As children, we learned that pleasing authority figures earned safety. Smiling earned warmth. Agreeing earned reward. Disagreeing felt risky. That conditioning can follow you into adulthood. You may find yourself over-explaining to bosses, over-accommodating friends, softening your tone with strong personalities, not because you lack strength, but because your nervous system equates disapproval with danger. The first step in detaching from approval is awareness. Notice how often you adjust yourself to avoid discomfort. Do you change opinions depending on who is in the room? Do you hesitate to express disagreement? Do you feel anxious after asserting a boundary? That anxiety is withdrawal from approval dependency. Its withdrawal is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Let me tell you about Elena. Elena was charismatic and well-liked. Everyone described her as sweet. She avoided conflict at all costs. If two people argued, she mediated. If someone criticized her, she absorbed it quietly. One day, during a team meeting, a colleague dismissed her idea without consideration. Normally, she would smile and move on. This time, she paused. She felt the urge to retreat, to protect the image of being easygoing. Instead, she said calmly, "I'd like to finish my point." Silence. Her heart raced. She expected tension, but something else happened. The room shifted. People leaned in. The colleague nodded. Elena finished her thought. Later, several co-workers told her they respected how she handled it. That moment was not loud. It was steady. And steadiness commands respect more than charm ever will. Approval often rewards compliance. Respect rewards consistency. If your behavior shifts based on who is watching, people sense instability. But if your tone remains grounded regardless of reaction, people sense strength. Strength does not beg to be liked. It simply exists. Here is a practical method to weaken approval addiction. Deliberately practice mild social discomfort. Express a preference that differs from the group. Decline an invitation without offering an elaborate excuse. State your opinion without cushioning it with humor. Then observe the outcome. Notice that nothing catastrophic happens. Your nervous system will calm faster each time. Another important shift: separate being disliked from being disrespected. So someone can dislike your boundary and still respect you. In fact, sometimes respect grows precisely because you held the boundary. Approval is emotional. Respect is structural. Approval feels warm. Respect feels solid. Warmth without solidity fades. Solidity without warmth intimidates. The balance is calm conviction. You can smile and still disagree. You can remain polite and still refuse. You can be generous and still selective. When you stop chasing approval, your decisions become cleaner. You choose based on alignment, not reaction. You speak because it's true, not because it will be praised. You decline because it protects your energy, not because it will be understood. And here is the paradox. When you stop needing approval, you often receive more of it. Because confidence is attractive, stability is calming. People trust those who are not constantly adjusting themselves. They feel safer around someone who stands firmly. Detachment from approval does not mean becoming indifferent. It means becoming anchored. Anchored in your values, anchored in your limits, anchored in your voice. When you are anchored, reactions no longer dictate your behavior. They become information, not instruction. If someone approves, you remain steady. If someone disapproves, you remain steady. That steadiness changes how people relate to you. You stop being the person who tries to please everyone. You become the person who is clear about who they are. And clarity commands respect. Let go of the need to be universally liked. It is an impossible goal. Aim instead to be internally aligned, because once your approval of yourself becomes stronger than the approval of others, your presence shifts. You speak slower, you pause longer, you decide more deliberately. And that quiet certainty is what people respond to. Not your niceness, not your compliance, but your conviction. Chapter 7. Control your tone, control the room. You can say the right words and still lose respect. You can set a boundary and still sound unsure. You can refuse a request and still appear apologetic. Why? Because people respond to tone before they respond to content. Tone carries authority, not volume, not aggression, not intensity, control. If your voice rises at the end of sentences, it sounds like a question. If you rush your words, it sounds like anxiety. If you soften everything with nervous laughter, it sounds like uncertainty. You may not notice it. Others do. And when tone signals insecurity, people instinctively lean into it. They push further. They test more. They assume flexibility. Most overly kind people don't struggle with what to say. They struggle with how they say it. There is a subtle tremor that enters their voice when they assert themselves. A slight upward pitch, a quickening pace, a smile that appears too quickly after something firm is spoken. That tremor communicates this: I'm not fully comfortable holding this line. And people sense it. You do not need to dominate a room to command respect. You need to regulate your nervous system. Your tone is a reflection of your internal state. If you feel anxious about disagreement, your tone will reveal it. If you feel guilty about setting boundaries, your voice will soften unnaturally. If you fear confrontation, your sentences will trail off. Calm tone equals internal stability. Internal stability equals perceived strength. Let's look at two versions of the same statement. Version 1. I don't think that really works for me. Maybe we could. I don't know. Version 2. That doesn't work for me. Same message, different impact. The difference is not arrogance, it is certainty. Certainty is quiet, it does not overcompensate, it does not rush, it does not fill space unnecessarily. To control your tone, you must first slow your pace. Most people who fear tension speak too quickly. Speed signals nervousness. Deliberate speech signals control. Slow down by 10%. Pause between sentences. Allow silence to exist without panic. Silence, when held calmly, increases your perceived authority. There is power in finishing a sentence and saying nothing else. Try this exercise. Speak a firm sentence in front of a mirror. I'm not available. Now say it again, but slower. Lower your pitch slightly. Let your shoulders drop. Maintain eye contact with your reflection. Notice the difference in how it feels. Tone is not about being intimidating. It is about being anchored. Another critical element is vocal pitch. Higher pitch often communicates excitement or nervousness. Lower pitch communicates steadiness. You do not need to artificially deepen your voice. You simply need to breathe before speaking. When you breathe from your diaphragm instead of your chest, your tone naturally stabilizes. Shallow breathing equals shallow tone. Deep breathing equals grounded delivery. Body posture also affects tone. If your shoulders are collapsed and your chin is lowered, your voice compresses. If your posture is upright, your words project naturally. You don't need to stand rigidly. You need alignment. Spine straight, shoulders relaxed, chin level. This posture sends a signal to your own nervous system. Stable. When your body is stable, your voice follows. There is another trap many kind people fall into. They smile constantly while delivering boundaries. A slight smile is fine, but smiling excessively when saying something firm dilutes the message. It subconsciously signals that you are softening the boundary to avoid discomfort. Practice a neutral expression, not cold, not stern, just neutral. Neutral expression with steady tone is powerful. Now consider eye contact. When you finish a firm statement, most people look away immediately. Looking away signals retreat. Instead, hold eye contact for 2 seconds after you finish speaking. 2 seconds feels long. That is why it works. Holding eye contact communicates that you stand by what you said. It does not require words. It reinforces authority non-verbally. Here's an example. Someone interrupts you mid-sentence. Instead of raising your voice, say calmly, "Let me finish." Then maintain eye contact. No anger, no extra explanation. The room will adjust. When your tone remains even, people perceive confidence. When your tone fluctuates nervously, they perceive flexibility. Flexibility is useful, but excessive flexibility dissolves respect. Calm tone also prevents escalation. If someone challenges you and you react emotionally, the interaction becomes about emotion. If you respond steadily, the interaction remains about substance. Calmness disarms tension. It communicates that you are not threatened, and people rarely challenge those who appear unthreatened. Remember this: you do not need to speak louder to command a room. You need to speak slower. You need to finish your sentences. You need to stop softening everything with apology. Tone is discipline. It requires awareness. Record yourself speaking in a normal conversation. Listen back. Notice where your voice rises. Notice where you rush. Notice where you add filler words like just, maybe, or kind of. Remove them gradually. Clean language. Clean tone. There is something deeply reassuring about someone whose voice does not shake under pressure. That reassurance creates trust. Trust creates respect. You're not trying to intimidate anyone. You're training your nervous system to remain steady when asserting yourself. Steadiness is magnetic. When you control your tone, you control perception. When you control perception, you shape how others respond. And when your words are delivered calmly and firmly, they land with weight. Not because they are loud, but because they are anchored. Control your breath, control your pace, control your posture, and you will notice something powerful. The room begins to adjust to you, not the other way around. Chapter 8. Replace. Kindness with standards. Kindness is a virtue. Standards are a structure. Without structure, virtue collapses. Many people believe that if they are good enough, patient enough, generous enough, others will automatically treat them well. That belief sounds noble. It is also incomplete, because people do not rise to your intentions. They rise, or fall, to your standards. If your only strategy in relationships is kindness, you leave behavior undefined. Undefined behavior expands. You tolerate lateness. You tolerate disrespect disguised as humor. You tolerate inconsistency. You tolerate being last on the priority list. You call it understanding. Others call it permission. Standards are not about controlling others. They're about defining what you participate in. There is a crucial shift here. Instead of asking, "How can I be more kind?" ask, "What do I accept?" That question changes everything. Acceptance sets the baseline. If you accept interruptions, you will be interrupted. If you accept being undervalued, you will be undervalued. If you accept inconsistency, you will receive inconsistency. Standards are invisible lines. They are not announced dramatically. They are demonstrated consistently. Let's break down what a standard actually is. A standard is a repeated behavior that you enforce without emotional escalation. It is not a threat. It is not an ultimatum. It is alignment between your words and your actions. For example, if someone repeatedly cancels plans at the last minute, kindness says, "It's okay, I understand." Standards say, "If you cancel again without notice, I won't reschedule." Calm, clear, followed through. The power is not in the sentence. The power is in the follow-through. Most people state boundaries once and then collapse under pressure. When they fail to follow through, their credibility decreases. Kindness without follow-through becomes noise. Standards with consistency become identity. When people know that your words match your actions, they adjust automatically. They don't need reminders. They don't test repeatedly, because testing yields the same outcome. There is a misconception that standards make you rigid. They don't. They make you predictable in a stable way. Predictability in values builds trust. If people know you don't tolerate disrespect, they will think twice before offering it. If people know you don't engage in gossip, they will stop bringing it to you. If people know your time is protected, they will schedule more thoughtfully. Not because you demanded it loudly, but because your behavior trained them. Kindness focuses on comfort. Standards focus on integrity. Comfort is temporary. Integrity is structural. When you operate only from kindness, you constantly adjust to maintain peace. When you operate from standards, peace is maintained by clarity. Let's look at a practical shift. Define 5 non-negotiables in your life, not dramatic ones. Simple, stable ones. Examples: I don't accept being spoken to disrespectfully. I don't respond to messages after a certain hour. I don't commit to plans I don't want to attend. I don't tolerate chronic lateness. I don't lend money without clear terms. These are not attacks. They are guidelines for participation. Now here's the crucial part. You do not need to announce all of them, and you enforce them quietly. If someone speaks disrespectfully, you respond once. "Don't speak to me like that." If it continues, you disengage. No yelling, no drama. Disengagement is a powerful standard. It communicates that access to you is conditional. Conditional access increases respect. Unlimited access decreases it. Another key element of standards is self-application. If you expect punctuality, you must be punctual. If you expect honesty, you must be honest. If you expect calmness, you must remain calm. Standards lose power when they are inconsistent. Consistency builds authority. Authority does not shout, it repeats calmly. When people know what you stand for, they don't need to guess. And when they don't need to guess, they feel stability. Stability commands respect more than charm ever will. There will be pushback at times. When you begin enforcing standards, some people may react. They may call you distant. They may say you've changed. They may accuse you of being cold. What they are really reacting to is loss of convenience. Convenience feels like closeness to those who benefit from it. But closeness built on self-sacrifice is fragile. When you replace convenience with clarity, the right people remain, and they respect you more deeply. Here is the deeper transformation. When you operate from standards, you stop needing external validation. Your behavior is guided internally. You no longer ask, will they be upset? You ask, is this aligned? Alignment removes confusion. Confusion weakens presence. Strong presence comes from internal agreement. Your thoughts, your words, and your actions match. That congruence is powerful. People feel it. They may not articulate it, but they sense coherence. and coherence commands respect. Warmth is still important. Compassion still matters. But compassion without boundaries drains you. Standards protect your energy. Energy preserved becomes confidence. Confidence expressed calmly becomes authority. Authority expressed consistently becomes respect. You do not need to harden your personality. You need to solidify your principles. Kindness should be intentional. Standards should be non-negotiable. When both coexist, you become steady. Steady people are not pushed around. They are not easily manipulated. They are not constantly explaining themselves. They move deliberately. They speak clearly. They enforce quietly. Replace excessive kindness with clear standards. Keep your warmth, keep your generosity, but anchor them in structure, because structure sustains respect, and respect sustains your peace. You do not need to become colder. You do not need to become harsher. You do not need to change your heart. You only need to change your standards. Over the last hour, you've seen something clearly. Being too kind was never the real problem. The problem was kindness without structure, generosity without limits, warmth without firmness. You are not weak. You are undefined. And undefined people get shaped by other people's expectations. But now you understand something different. Respect is not granted because you sacrifice. It is granted because you stand. When your no is steady, when your tone is calm, when your time is protected, when your words match your actions, something shifts. People adjust. They don't always announce it, but they feel it. They feel the edges. They feel the clarity. They feel that access to you is intentional, not automatic. And that changes how they approach you. This transformation is not dramatic. You won't wake up tomorrow as a different personality. It's subtle. It begins in micro moments. The pause before you say yes. The silence after you state a boundary. The refusal to apologize unnecessarily. The choice to hold eye contact instead of looking away. Small adjustments, repeated consistently. That's how identity changes. Here is what will happen next. Some people will respect you more immediately. They will sense the steadiness. Others may feel uncomfortable. They may say, "You've changed." You have. You stopped overcompensating. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped over-giving. And if someone only valued you for your availability, they may react. Let them. Respect built on convenience was never stable. The right people do not fear your standards. They align with them. Remember this distinction clearly. You're not becoming less kind. You are becoming selective. Selective with your time. Selective with your energy. Selective with your yes. Your yes should feel powerful. If you say yes to everything, it becomes weightless. But when your yes is earned, it carries impact. That is authority. Authority does not shout. Authority does not rush. Authority does not chase approval. Authority stands calmly in its decisions. And calmness is your final layer. Not softness, not reactivity. Calm. When someone pressures you, breathe. When someone challenges you, slow down. When someone tries to guilt you, stay level. Calm is what separates strength from aggression. Aggression tries to overpower. Calm simply refuses to move. You do not need to convince anyone of your worth. You demonstrate it through alignment. From this point forward, operate by a simple rule. If it violates your standards, it does not get access to you. No drama, no announcement, just alignment. And here's something powerful to understand. When you respect yourself consistently, your nervous system stabilizes. You stop second-guessing conversations. You stop replaying what you should have said. You stop feeling drained after every interaction, because you are no longer betraying yourself in small ways. Self-respect creates internal peace, and internal peace creates external presence. Presence commands respect more than effort ever will. This is not about controlling others. It is about controlling yourself, your tone, your pace, your reactions, your access. You're responsible for your boundaries. Others are responsible for how they respond to them. Once you truly accept that, fear fades. The fear of disappointing people, the fear of conflict, the fear of not being liked. You will still feel discomfort at times. That's natural. Growth always feels unfamiliar before it feels powerful. But the discomfort of standing firm is far lighter than the exhaustion of constant self-betrayal. Choose your discomfort wisely. Temporary tension or chronic resentment. You now know the difference. And you now know the solution. Clarity, boundaries, standards, calmness. Practice them daily. Not dramatically, quietly, steadily. And over time, something remarkable will happen. You will walk into rooms differently. You will speak differently. You will respond differently. And people will sense it before you even say a word. Because respect is not requested. It is radiated. If this message resonated with you, share this audiobook with someone who is kind, generous, and silently tired of being underestimated. Someone who gives too much. Someone who apologizes too often. Someone who deserves to stand taller, because kindness is powerful, but only when it stands on structure, and now you have that structure. Stay steady, stay clear, and never shrink again.